Greed. Yeah. Ninja Scroll. Yamaru. Yo. We near the end of days, the midst of the midnight hour. World War III, the goal is ultimate power. Save my soul from the god of this world. Make me whole and shine real bright like pearls. Now let's think, have we all been deceived by traditions to dress up some old fir trees and evergreen wreaths? What about mistletoe? And what is the reason for this? We don't know. We don't even bother to question why. And when the truth comes out, we quick to deny. The heart is evil and black with sin. What comes from your mouth comes from deep within. Man, it's much bigger than you sheeple think. You better wake up soon or get lost in the drink. Plans in motion, almost there. Battle for your soul with spiritual warfare. Sign of the time we know, cause we watching the men of the elite steadily plotting. Try to warn your family, they don't believe ya. Think by the God of this world, great deceiver. Sign of the time we know, cause we watching the men of the elite steadily plotting. Try to warn your family, they don't believe ya. Check it, take by the God of this world, great deceiver. You got your TV viewers watching all the action. Satan's main weapon to cause a distraction. Media spews lies, iPods running. PSP kids got on the go funnin'. Phones that do everything but make calls just to keep you asleep when the system falls. Carbon tax, huh? What? What's this again? And where was I when all this was happening? G20 Summit, Copenhagen. But I can tell you what drugs Britney's taking, or what girl Tiger Woods had an affair. But the Bilderberg group, man, I really don't care. False propaganda that corrupts your mind and keeps you asleep time after time. Line up now, come get the mark of the beast. You'll do it, cause you follow them like sheep. Sign of the time we know, cause we watching the men of the elite steadily plotting. Try to warn your family, they don't believe ya. Think by the God of this world, great deceiver. Sign of the time we know, cause we watching the men of the elite steadily plotting. Try to warn your family, they don't believe ya. Think by the God of this world, great deceiver. That you've been conditioned to him seeing out to complete his mission. First the flu shot, then H1N1. Microchips under the skin has begun. Knowledge is what we've all been lacking. Chips being used for government tracking. Sounds way out there, still don't believe me? Google RFID and go CB. I am your family, why would I lie to you? Cashless society coming real soon too. Blue Beam Project, one world religion. Pray to who they say, no choice given. Or die persecuted for Christ, get beheaded unless 666 in your skin is embedded. World is filled with so much hate, you better wake up real soon before it's too late. Sign of the time we know, cause we watching the men of the elite steadily plotting. Try to warn your family, they don't believe ya. Think by the God of this world, great deceiver. Sign of the time we know, cause we watching the men of the elite steadily plotting. Try to warn your family, they don't believe ya. Think by the God of this world, great deceiver. Sign of the time we know, cause we watching the men of the elite steadily plotting. Try to warn your family, they don't believe ya. Think by the God of this world, great deceiver. Sign of the time we know, cause we watching the men of the elite steadily plotting. Try to warn your family, they don't believe ya. Think by the God of this world, great deceiver. Yeah, Ninja Scroll. What? Yo, with so much going on in this world, I cannot lay back and watch evil man with his plans that go way back. Just keep living your life, how can you say that? Try to make us into slaves, I don't play that. Change doesn't always mean it's for the better. Read every policy right to the letter. Hope for a new day, anticipation. Blind followers of the
abomination.
Just do the research, you'll see what I mean. It's a new world religion, we're all going green. Environmentalists scream, save the earth. Hold up now, shouldn't we help each other first? MK Ultra, mind control weapons. How long before we learn to stop catching? Party all the way up to 2011. End up in hell cause you won't see heaven.
We got Agenda 21, depopulation, sustainable development across the nation. Harm technology controls the weather. This can't happen, never say never. Sounds ridiculous and even insane, that Katrina and hurricanes could be man-made. They want your eyes closed, fished out of water. Pawns in the game being sent to the slaughter.
It's the Wake Up Project, time to open eyes up. Free your mind, escape, you better wise up. Everything in your world, we about to shake up. Left for too long, it's time to wake up. It's the Wake Up Project, time to open eyes up. Free your mind, escape, you better wise up. Everything in your world, we about to shake up. Left for too long, it's time to wake up.
You got say in the music, soul selling artists, give up salvation just to go the farthest. ELF speaking thoughts into your mind. You better get saved now, we'll get left behind. Global warming, fake like evolution. Depopulate the earth, their solution. AIDS and the swine flu, bio-weaponry, all right in front of your face to see easily. This can't be true, must be a lot of hype right under your nose, hidden in plain sight. Exposed in movies, sight unseen. Pandemic is spread, we saw quarantine. Game of the movie, mind control nemesis. MK Ultra is where they got the premises. Open your mind, come on, you're not brainless. Won't hurt to learn it all, cause it's painless.
It's the Wake Up Project, time to open eyes up. Free your mind, escape, you better wise up. Everything in your world, we about to shake up. Left for too long, it's time to wake up. It's the Wake Up Project, time to open eyes up. Free your mind, escape, you better wise up. Everything in your world, we about to shake up. Left for too long, it's time to wake up. Free your mind, come on, it's time to wake up. Free your mind, come on, it's time to wake up. Free your mind, come on, it's time to wake up. Free your mind, come on, it's time to wake up.
You got Big Pharma pushing the legal drug system. Forget about all the side effects that you're getting. FDA approved, beware poisonous. We are the guinea pigs. Free sample before you miss.
All over TV, terrorists. Cut you with the green style, man, drunken monkey fist. Red mask ninja hit hard, and I never miss. Change what you ask for, change what you gonna get.
The brown mask ninja, underground nation. FEMA camps ready for gun confiscation. Days of the cast, this world and ship tracking. Media broadcast, aliens attacking.
You got chemtrail bearing your field, air pollution. One world religion, Christian execution. From a truth right here, not scared to shoot ya. Illuminati card game shows the real future. The Wake Up Project, time to rise up. Free your mind, escape, you better wise up. Everything in your world, we about to shake up. Slept for too long, it's time to wake up. It's the Wake Up Project, time to open eyes up. Free your mind, escape, you better wise up. Everything in your world, we about to shake up. Slept for too long, it's time to wake up.
Welcome, you guys. I appreciate you being here. I have a new channel, as you know. If you're here on YouTube, you know it's a new channel. But if you're not here and you're watching from Facebook, D Live, or Twitch, that works just as well. I can see all the comments from all of those places all at the same time. So we have on here with us Mr. Gary Wayne. Please say hello. Gary?
So happy to be here, and
There he is.
happy to be here, and looking forward to the show.
Excellent. And I also have Mr. NPC 3.14. Please say hello.
Hello, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. And it's nice to see you again, Gary, or be with you anyway.
Yes, so good to be back with you as well.
It's been almost a year. It was St. Patty's Day of last year, the last time we came together. And one of the reasons I bring on my buddy NPC, not only is he incredibly intelligent, but I think he asks better questions than me, Gary. And so I get nervous. I'm like, what if I don't think of good questions? What if I don't think of enough? But he's got great questions that I understand. I just don't think of them. But what I want to talk about first, Gary, is you have a new book that's coming out, and I don't know that you're going to name it Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2, but that's what I titled this video. But would you please we haven't read that book. We've read your first one. Maybe give us an overall, as much as you're willing to talk about, we can ask questions along the way, of the new book and when we might expect to get to see it.
Yeah, and really working hard on it, and really enjoying the writing of the book. It's been a lot of fun, and I am going to be hopefully naming it, depending on the publisher, because publishers can also tend to have a whole different opinion. But I want to, and the author, but I want to sort of market it in the same kind of branding. So I have the website up, so I want to sort of work more not from my name as a brand, but maybe as the Genesis 6 as the brand. So the title I'm kind of thinking about is Prehistory and Prophecy, the Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2. So when I listen to people on shows and I receive emails and all the social media and all the feedback that I get, the thing that I realized was what people really wanted was more information specifically targeted at the Bible in a way that hasn't been presented to them in the past in terms of giants. And, there's so much information in the book about giants. And so I want to be able to tell that. But in order to talk about the giants, you have to talk about the complete sort of context of the journey that humankind is on, that begins with the angelic rebellion. So I'm going to talk about things like the hierarchy of the angels and explain it to people in a way that they haven't seen it taken back to the passages in the Bible, so that they can sort of sort that out for themselves. Because the Adamite mission is the resolution to the angelic rebellion, which sort of leads us into prophecy. And so again, what people want to know more about is not just end time prophecy, but how is it connected to all of these other events? So as I'm explaining and rolling through these topics, I'm going to be connecting that to the end time, so that people can understand the allegory that's in the prophecy and understand the fuller context as to what's going to be talked about. So I'm envisioning about 5 sections, 6 if I can't find a way to shorten it, but it'll be about that. And the basic ones, and I've got a lot of it, obviously written by this point. I'm going to open up and talk more about giants in the beginning, just in terms of the veracity of it. And I'm going to cover off things like, some of the misinformation that's out there as to giants. Are they embellished, or are they actually giants? And where does the word giant come from? And I define that and give you the etymology in the meetings. And because a lot of people will say, well, giant comes from gigantes, and that means earthborn, and that's true. but that's only part of it. So it's the misinformation part of it. So it's a Greek word that's been adopted into the English language, let's say through Old French, and people say, well, it means earthborn. Then they can sort of say, okay, that means that this whole thing. And I think how it was put to me and by one person I had a debate with was this, the tyranny of the word giant in the English language, that these weren't really giants. But the thing is, that's half the story, because the gigantes are like these 100-hand giant beings, and they're almost like a god because they're created from Uranus and Gaia. These are really giant sort of beings. And one of the beings is named Gyges, and there's 2 or 3 other of these major beings. And Gyges is the root word for gigantes, and Gyges is the root word for giant. So it goes Gyges, gigantes, and then into the etymology coming down into giant. And the G tends to be silent when you've got an I or an E in Greek, so it would be Gaies. And I think there's a transliteration thing that goes on with gigantes that should actually be giantes, but I haven't been able to sort of nail that part down. But it doesn't really matter, because gigantes roots back to Gyges, one of the gigantes. And so I'm going to give information like that people can talk about. I mean, people don't realize that, you know, the word Rephaim for giants is used 25 times for post-Diluvian giants in the New Testament. Most people don't sort of understand that. So as I sort of bring into that veracity, then I walk into the angelic aspect of it. So we need to understand the angelic hierarchy. And there's a hierarchy that most people might be familiar with, that is the standard one. And I'm going to change that a little bit, because it doesn't really stand up to what's sort of in the Bible in terms of the 3 categories and 9 sets of angels. So I'm going to define each of those and take those back to the passages in the Bible so that they understand the hierarchy and what they're responsible for within that hierarchy. And I lead that into going into the giants of the post-Diluvian epoch, because that's really what affects us, and the Baalim in Mount Hermon. And that's sort of the first section of the book. And then I'm going to lead into what I call, not lead into, but go right into, because it's going to be directly related to the Baalim, what I call the Shazu, as they're called, or the Emau, or the Shamau, depending on which source that you're using on it. These are the hybrid humans. These are the hybrid humans that are the offspring of the Rephaim and human females. And I'm going to talk about all of that and lead that into an understanding of the patriarchless Canaanites that are in Genesis 10, so that you understand who they are, where they come from, and their size differences. And I'm going to actually take, using some unique ways, those and provide a patriarch, a Rephaim patriarch for each of those patriarchless Canaanites. And then from there, I'm going to go into all the different names for giants that are in the Old Testament. I mean, most people don't realize all the different names. They may know some of the obvious ones, let's say, you know, like the Emim and the Zamzuzim. But I'm going to get in there and I'm going to talk about, you know, all the different ones, whether or not it's the Cherithim, or it is the, just trying to think of a good example. The Pelethim would be another one. And so I'm going to go into, and there's just so many different ones that people don't really sort of think about. And so I'm going to list all of those, define them, and tell you where they lived and how they fit into that military state along with the Canaanites that they had in the covenant land. And then I'm going to go into the giant wars, and I begin obviously with the War of Giants, which is so important for understanding of a lot of things that roll forward. Then I'm going to walk through all the different campaigns and wars that are in the wars of the Exodus, or the conquest as I like to call it, and to show you where the giants are there, because they're all throughout that battle, and just walk through the different campaigns and just show how many references there are to these giant names. And then I'm going to take that into the age of the Judges and show how those wars are mostly wars of giants and hybrid giants throughout the Judges, and take that through David and King Saul. And then I'm going to be moving in after that into what I would call different kinds of the Nephilim, which is, kind of really gets kind of interesting, and take that back sort of biblically. So how we understand that is something that we need to be aware of. And then I'm going to bring it all sort of forward into some end time prophecies as a lot of this sort of comes together. So I'm going to have several chapters, and I haven't finished that last section off yet, where I just sort of roll all of this forward into how these giant nations define the beast kings, and how it's interconnected with Babylon, how it's connected with the mighty ones of the New Testament, why it's like the days of Noah. Just sort of link that all back together, because I'm going to be connecting as we go, but then I want to do some chapters that are going to be, I think, rather eye-opening for people.
And when this book is available, are you going to have the same website, do you think?
Yes.
Or are you going to make a new one?
Same website. I'm going to offer both books off the same website, so there'll be 2 different pages for each of the book, and again, a chapter summary and a excerpt from each chapter for the new book, and you can buy both at the same time. I just got my new purchasing pages up. That's going to be able to handle this. There's a little bit more work to do to handle a few more aspects in terms of the monetary aspect, but my old vendor, which is the largest vendor in Canada, was just pathetic with security and card testers and page not working. So I just got the new one up in preparation for getting into the new sort of refreshing of the website for the new book. So, and the thing that people are going to be, I think, amazed at, and I'm sure the publisher is going to want to whittle it back, but I'll keep a lot in there. I'll keep most of it in there. Is that not only, I think, is each of the chapters going to be sort of riveting and very informational. It's the thing that I learned about my first book is people liked all of the sources that I showed in the book. And I do that in this book, but there's going to be more information that comes with the sources, so that you've got it all right out there. So it's not, you don't have to necessarily go look things up. You're going to have a lot more information within the endnotes.
Probably a lot of people have, well, I don't know of a lot. Several listeners here maybe already have the original book called The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, and I have dropped the link for that in the chat, but I can drop it again. And I know that NPC asked me if I would pen something, but I don't know what link you wanted me to pen. But anyway, I'm going to drop this link because this is a book, not only a book that's the resource, but there's many resources on the website itself where you can view the chapters and what they're about. And you can email Gary, and he answers his emails, and he is very good about sending you. I mean, you could let people know about how you have a lot more information besides just the book, if you don't mind explaining how you have a lot of the extra stuff you'll send out if the people want.
Yeah, one of the things I learned after I published the book is that, again, people really want more information and things that they can sort of feel and touch. And so whether or not people buy a book from me or not isn't part of the requisite whether or not I would provide information, because I do this at no charge. So if people want some information on a topic, let's say they wanted to know, what's all the back and forth about the Book of Enoch? Can I trust it? Can I trust it? Or what would be the issues? I have a document on that, and if you ask for it, I'll give it to you. If you want to know some detailed information, even though I covered off, a lot of these topics off in my book on the Essenes, as to who they are, what the historians said, what they actually believed, as opposed to what people think they believe, and who they were. I got a document on that. So, and you can go through it. So if somebody wanted one, let's say, on the lion men of Moab, I've got one on that. If they wanted one on the mighty men of the end time, I've got a document on that. So just name it by topic. If I've got a document on it, I'll send it to you. And if not, I'll try and answer your questions as to what you're looking about it. I just may not have a document on it. I have a lot of notes on things that I just haven't had time to put into complete documents, but I can certainly provide a lot of information on a lot of topics. And it may take me a while to get back to you, but I will get back to you.
Yes, and one of those things you did for me was like a J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis document that I had got a new computer and I forgot I had it, and I just pulled it up the other day and I was thinking, man, I need to review that, because again, what we can learn in this when we're trying to find truth is also about who the people are that we should and should not trust to give us the good information. And it's so easy to listen to certain voices when you get in, especially if you're a new Christian. I didn't grow up as a Christian, and even if I did, it might be the same. But as a new Christian, or even maybe somebody growing up in a Christian church where, the Christian radio, they listen to all the same musicians, they get all their same information from, you got to read this book, you got to read Spurgeon, you got to read C.S. Lewis, you got to read J.R.R. Tolkien, and to think that they're really saying some things. And I'm not trying to say Spurgeon was that way. I was just throwing out names. But for instance, who you get your information from should become a spiritual maturity level. And I think when we start getting into information that you cover, Gary, we're reaching a level of spiritual truth and maturity that most Christ followers don't want anything to do with. In fact, I only have a radio in my car. I can't listen to my own music in it. So I put on Christian radio because I figured, well, it's certainly better than secular. And the things that they say on there just blow my mind. And I didn't have to call, but I suddenly felt compelled to call one day and say, where is your level of spiritual maturity that you say some of these things on your channel? I actually got through to a pastor, and I doubt anything will ever change. But I wanted to just say that because I think you are, I pray for discernment, wisdom, and truth. And I don't think I know and believe that you are a voice of reason and wisdom, and that Yahoo is certainly working through you as a conduit, and your brain level and capacity is a gift that is wonderful for us to get to be a part of. So I encourage people, again, go to the link I just dropped for Genesis6conspiracy.com and get the book if you have not, but plenty of resources on there besides that. But I'm telling people in the chat also, if you have questions for Gary as we go, we haven't picked a particular topic that we expect you to stick to tonight. So we thought we would just I'm going to let NPC ask a few questions, because I know he has some that he's really interested in talking about that have to do with giants. So it comes back around to what your new book, I think, primarily covers as far as giants, but you can tell me if I'm wrong. But go ahead, NPC, and ask some questions.
Wow, thank you, Aaron. So with the etymology, like the study of the word itself, you mentioned a few things. So Nephilim, for instance, connects to this, correct? And that's what Genesis 6 really defines, are these men of renown. So is it that they're trying to make a name for themselves in opposition to God? And does this constitute what is known as the left-hand path in opposition to God's right hand, as it were? Like, how does that work?
I do like that analogy, the left hand versus the right hand, because typically that's sort of understood by the spurious forces, the offspring, and that these are the ones that are rebellious to God. So when we look at that word renown, we get a couple phrases in there that the giants, which are the Nephil, and I am put it on for Nephilim is the male plural, that they are the offspring of the sons of God, who are the Shemaim, as they're known in Hebrew, the heavenly ones, and the Nephilim, which are the fallen ones. And the root word for Nephilim is Nephilim. Not to be confused that they're the same, because even though you can get more meaning from the root word of the extension word is still sort of the root meaning, but you can get more context. So when you look at the Nephilim, they're tyrants, they're giants, they're a tribe of giants, and they're connected to the fallen ones, which are the Nephilim, and the Shemaim as the heavenly ones, as they're also called. And the next word is, they're the mighty ones of old and men of renown, and that's Gibborim, right? So as the mighty one, and Gibbor means, strong, mighty, but it doesn't always mean giant. It can also describe angels, which it does, and it describes the power of God in the Bible. It's used, I think, 158 times, a lot of times to describe giants, but not always. So you have to be careful with that. You have giant translated only once into English in the book of Job from the word Gibor. So typically you're going to have Nephilim for giant in the King James Version. That's 3 times, Genesis 6, 4, Numbers 13, 33. Gibor once out of the book of Job. And then Rephaim will be the word giant 25 other times when that word is used. And sometimes Rephaim is used instead of giant, as in Genesis 15 or Genesis 14, when it's referring to this nation of the giants after the flood. And then, as the word that you're talking about, the men of renown. So men is pretty straightforward, back to some sort of physical man, right? But this is a hybrid angelic human, as the offspring of the sons of God. And they're the men of renown, and renown goes back to 2 words, one being Shem, as in the name Shem, which means famous. In this case, it can also mean infamous. So they're famous, and I also think because they're evil, they were infamous. And it also goes back to that other word that I was talking about in the singular form, which is Shema, for the plural Shemaim. And so they were not only the mighty ones, but the men of heaven, right? The offspring of the Nephilim. And so you get a lot that sort of comes out of there in terms of the understanding. And when you break those words down into what they actually fully mean, you've got connections between angels and giants, you know, sort of coming out the wazoo just in those couple of examples. And that these are the ones who became famous on earth for their deeds. These are the ones who usurped kingship. These are the ones who were taught the war by the angel Azazel in the book of Enoch. And they brought brutality and persecution and enslavement for humankind before the flood. And that's why they're the famous ones of renown for their deeds, because they were mighty and they could do great things, good and bad. And unfortunately, they did mostly bad things. And then these are a kind of giant that shows up after the flood. Again, we're not told exactly how. I tend to fall into a second incursion, but I'm open to survival on another ark, in the earth, off the earth, you know, with the help of sort of fallen angels. And so they do show up, but there's a distinction, because the 2 times that Nephilim show up after the flood in Numbers 13:33, it's talking about the Anakim, were the children of giants. And it says that twice, and it goes back to the word Nephilim. Well, the Anakim were not Nephilim. They were Rephaim, as they're defined in Deuteronomy 2 and elsewhere. But Deuteronomy 2 is probably the best place to look at Anakim, and it's describing them twice as giants, which goes back to the Hebrew word Rapha and Rephaim. And so that's the embellished part of the report. It's not that the Anakim didn't exist, because they show up many times throughout the giant wars and you know, into the Philistine Empire and things like that. But they aren't Nephilim. And so somehow Rephaim are distinct from the Nephilim. We don't know how. Only thing that we know is that they're called something different after the flood, as in the Rephaim. So the Nephilim were only before the flood, by the sounds of it. Rephaim could have been before the flood, but we don't get scripture on that. But they're certainly there after the flood, and I think they're more related to the Baalim. And again, understanding, you know, the Baalim, for example, is really, really important, because these are the offspring gods, just as Zeus is an offspring god, and you get Zeus producing Hercules after the flood, but you also have Greek giants before the flood. So it starts to make some sense when you start to sort of connect some of the dots on this. So I think it's important to understand when the Bible uses specific words, as in renown that you were referring to, it's a very, very, very important word, and it connects a lot as you take that back to Shema and sometimes Shem throughout the Old Testament, that it is actually referring a lot of times to the giants as well.
I want to butt in with a question real quick. What that NPC always talks about that he's taught me is that the enza in influenza means giant or even stars, like so influence of the giants and the stars. Do you have anything on that in the new book that's related to current events, or is it just merely going back into bloodlines again?
No, I'm not really focusing on the bloodlines. I think I handle a lot of the bloodlines quite well. I'll talk about it to the first book. And so I want to, obviously I have to
We've lost Gary.
but
Gary,
I want to
oh,
provide
you're back. Okay, good.
additional
Sorry, we lost you for just a moment, Gary. Can you hear
on
me?
influence.
Can you hear me, Gary?
Okay.
I'm sorry, we lost you
I
for just a
can.
moment.
Could hear you.
Okay, we lost you for just
Yeah,
a
I can-
moment
yeah, I
when you
can.
were saying you didn't want to be redundant. That's where we lost you.
So what I was going to
Oh
you
dear.
were cutting
What
in
is-
and out, so I didn't really understand what you had said. So
I think it might
I
be
wonder
on
if
just your
it's-
end. I was able.
I wonder if it's on my end. Anyway, I can hear you now clearly. I'm so sorry. Please carry on.
Wonderful.
okay, that's good. I haven't done a research on the word influence, but it certainly has my curiosity up. So it'd be something I'll look forward to learning more about. But I am, as you mentioned, I'm a real fan of etymology and how things sort of roll forward and how they end up in our language today that we don't even recognize what the meanings are. Royale would be, typical examples, that comes down through, Latin and Hebrew and all sorts of other languages into French and into English, and it means kings of God, right? So you have Roy, R-O-I, which is king, and A-L, which is a transliteration of E-L. It could be I-L or it could be A-L-U. There's lots of transliterations for the word L that we get for God and angel in the Bible out of Hebrew, and these are the kings of God. And that in itself tells you where they get their divine right to rule, but it's not the God of the Bible that they're referring to. They're referring to a specific fallen angel and a specific patriarch that started their branch that gives them their divine right to rule.
So is that somehow connected to the pharaonic lines, or what we sometimes hear as the blue bloods, or all these fallen angel bloodlines actually competing and jockeying for different? You mentioned like how they had hierarchies and abilities associated with them. So is it kind of like that?
No, I
Or they
don't
have-
think there would be rivals within the fallen angels, because they are an army.
You
right?
mentioned-
they are like the counterfeit of God's army. And so that's, that is the host of heaven. And that's the Hebrew word Saba, T-S-A-B-A as it's transliterated. And it is a organization that has rank and divisions. And so all the fallen angels fit within that rank, like an army, just as they do with the loyal angels in heaven. So Satan's at the top, and you have the council of gods in like Psalms 82, and you have the 70 nations that have a head angel that are all overseeing. Where the rivalries begin is not with the invisible ones, but with the visible ones. And the visible ones are the spurious offspring of the fallen angels who usurp the kingships and the priesthoods and the religion and the education and have ran their feudal system ever since. And it's within those rivals that you have all the sort of rivalry that's going on.
So are they trying to like usurp the priestly duties? Like for instance, Shem was kind of supposed to be that role, right? So are they trying to like is it the wolf in sheep's clothing kind of thing, or they usurp that mantle?
Well, I think we'd
Try
have to
to.
look at it from two different perspectives. First of all, is we need to look at it from the polytheist perspective of the mystical religions, that all of those priesthoods were bloodlines. And they controlled all of the polytheist religion, and that's the mystical religion that Enoch begat before the flood. I like to call it Enochian mysticism. It's called Babylon and the daughters of Babylon in the Bible, and it's it's the religion of Egypt. It's the religion of Mesopotamia with the Magi, and it's part of the organizational structure of the beast kingdoms and the beast kings and the giants. And so you have this Nephilim or Rephaim king, and this happens both before and after the flood. And then you have their religion that is run by their bloodlines. And then the extended elite class is all of their extended families, right? They control that whole thing. So roll that forward to what happens with Israel, and you're going to get a bloodline of priesthood as well through Aaron and the Levites. But it's not that Israel is counterfeiting the fallen angel structure. This was the structure that was set up before the flood, with the Adamites as being sort of the chief sort of priest, and then you get Seth that comes along afterwards, and then very shortly after you get the genealogy of Seth in Genesis 4, you understand that all the Sethian line is going to turn back to God as being basically, priests of God in that bloodline, and over time they're going to get corrupted and only Noah is left. But that's the same principle that begat with the Adamites that Cain is going to counterfeit. So when Enoch, son of Cain, creates the mystical religion, he's creating a bloodline of priests there. Now roll this forward to the time of Christianity, where you have the Jerusalem church being set aside in favor of the Roman church at the time of Constantinople, and you get some homogenization of things that we shouldn't really have in Christianity, and it wasn't part of the Jerusalem church as it homogenizes with the empire's old religion of Mithraism and Sol Invictus and a few other things, and that's why we get a lot of that imagery and dating of worship that comes with that homogenization. But the bishops or the popes that are going to rule the church are soon going to be, or even right out of the gate, are usurped by the elite, because it's the elite who are educated. It's the elite who are going to educate the priests, and the priests are going to have different positions within the hierarchy. So there is going to be maybe some people who aren't part of the bloodlines that are sort of servants and workers at the bottom end, but the whole hierarchy is going to be overtaken by the bloodlines so that they can control that, and that they can start to put viruses, so to speak, into the religion and try and provide misinformation and lead people more away from God, and or doubt God, which is all they really need to do. That has gone on ever since the beginning of the Christian church. Now, not all the people that are in the priesthoods are, trying to do that, because you get this sort of conservative pushback that's going on all of the time. But you also have that other side that is the outside of the Jerusalem church teachings and the biblical teachings that's going on within the church.
There's a question in the chat that I think is directed to you. It says, are you including the Mesoamerican cultures in those descendants, the royal descendants?
Yeah, that's a question. I wanted just to take a pause to talk about that. So when we're talking about the descendants, we would be talking about post-diluvian or after the flood. Just to keep it sort of simplified. So if we're talking about Mesoamerican or First Nations in North American, or let's say the Inca in South America, these are post-diluvian people. So their society is going to be set up the same way.